Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. It is Amy here and I'm here for a little tutorial. So when I was showing my completed pages in Mythomorphia, when I was doing my complete book tour, one of the pages that I showed was this tree spirit or tree nymph. And I had a question about how I did the background for this page, because this foresty sort of vibes wasn't on the page as printed. It is something that I added into the page. And while I could have sat there and typed out a reply, sometimes it's just easier to actually show these things. And right now I've been working on this page in live streams, and this is quite a good page to show that background technique on. I think it would look really cool with a foresty background. So I thought I would take you through this today and explain to you how I did the forest background. So I'm just going to set myself up here and I'll be right back with you. I've got some examples of different photographs of the forest and how light works in a forest sort of scenery. And what you'll see is that the foreground trees are really crisp and clear, and then as the picture moves back it gets more and more faded. So this is our foreground, and what we're going to do is create the illusion of a background of forest trees. Now the other thing that a lot of the pictures show is maybe like one direct light source where the light is coming through the trees, and that helps differentiate the actual tree branches. In this picture, I want this to be the predominant light source because I want to play with the glow of this, lighting up the piece. So I'm not going to have one direct light source. Instead, I'm going to have a generic light source where it starts darker and goes lighter, just like it is daytime. And because of the gaps in the tree, you are starting to see some of that light filtering through. So that is how I am going to do it. You have, of course, more than welcome to focus on the light in one section, and if you were to do that, instead of working in a gradient up, you would have a focal spot and you would work that gradient out. So that's just something to bear in mind in terms of how your light would work. But the process should mostly be the same. Maybe I'll do this again and I'll do like a focal one to show that difference as well. If you're interested in that, please let me know. But let's get started. So I have just a bog standard pencil. This is just one randomly found on my desk. It is one that I am going to be working pretty lightly with. We don't want to go too heavy with these lines. But I am going to start by just removing some of this ink transfer. So for those that haven't watched my live stream, the base that is currently on the page is Inktense pencils. That is what I've worked this page in so far. So I can just erase over the top because it's set Inktense. It's not going to lift. And what we're going to do is we're going to start sketching in just some trees. Now this is our foreground tree, so this is our nice crisp tree, but then there would be remnants of trees in the background. So all I'm going to do is just roughly sketch in some lines. Now you could technically grab a ruler for this, but trees, they aren't straight, you know, they have little curvatures and bends, so your lines don't have to be perfect. And I am starting with some of the wider trees, so just some lines. Get rid of that eraser dust. So that's all like about 2 centimeters wide. I think that's about half an inch. I'm not good on the imperial. Is it imperial? I don't know. I'm used to metric. Metric's easy. It's all multiples of 10. But after I've got a couple of bigger ones in there, we'll start doing some smaller ones and then some smaller ones again. Because not only are trees different sizes, but as they disappear into the background, they're going to get smaller as well. And to be honest, you may not even be seeing these lines I'm sketching in. They're pretty light. We're trying to keep it pretty light. And even if I sketch these in, I might add in additional lines as I colour. It's just to give us a rough idea of where to start. Just bringing this down. Put a super skinny one in here, and so this one I might not even extend, I might just keep as a line. Cool. Alright, so we've just got some rough lines in just to sort of give us an idea of where to start on some of this stuff. And again, we might end up changing some of this a bit later on. So now we're going to start with basing out some of our colours. So I'm going to continue with the ink tints that I have been using. It's the wrong green, leaf green. So the four main colours that I have used so far in this piece for the trees is bark and willow for the trunk, which is a very dark brown and a medium sort of brown. I don't have the complete set of ink tints even before the expansion that they've just announced, so I do need to do new colour charts but also get some more of them because I've been loving them so far. And then the other colours that I've been using is leaf green and Ionian green. So that's what we're kind of going to keep trying to work with today. And we may pull in some others as we need it again as well. So we're going to start with a willow. And I'm going to use the willow just to sort of edge where those trees are, because if these trees are being backlit, the edges of these branches would be the lightest. So because I've got a lot of bark to use, with this being a lighter tone, this is where we would see the willow. And I am being a rough here. I am not being pedantic. I am not being clean. I am avoiding where I have pre-coloured in the foreground, and it could be easier to do this without that there. So I'm just going to bring this in a touch more. I do love with ink tints how you can kind of be very loose with the colouring, because there's just so much pigment in these pencils that this is enough to help bring it together. And with these skinnier trees, I'm pretty much just covering the whole thing. It's one of those things, I know right now it looks horrible, you're just going to have to trust me on this one. Sometimes things look ugly. So now I'm going to pull out that bark, and we're just going to use this on the center of these trunks, and I'm also going to use this at the bottom as well, because the bottom is where the branches and the trees wouldn't be getting as much light, so this will help start establishing our gradient. So the bottom of the trees, and then in the center, and just overlapping it with that willow that we extended out. And anywhere where I feel like I want a bit more pigment, I want a better transition, I might just chuck in a little bit more willow. Again, we are going to activate and blend this, so don't have to be too pedantic. So on some of these skinnier ones, it's just literally a line in the middle. It's not even a lot. I'm just going to move that a little bit on there. But, right, so you might be looking at this and go, well, this is not a lot of, like, trees in the forest. And you're right, it's not. Because we aren't done yet. So, again, if you look at that reference picture, you'll see that the foreground, which is what this fella is, nice and crisp. Midground, you can kind of see what's going on. And then the background is blur. But because of the way the blur is, there is the illusion of more trees back there. And we are going to create that illusion. But right now, we're creating the midground. So, now what I'm going to do is, I have my tissue, I have some water. Take the excess off. And we're just going to start activating these trees. And I'm starting with the dark at the bottom and pulling that up. You want to create a good blur between the two colours. So the bark and the willow are not the best two colours to mix for this. I really do need to get some more browns in the Inktense to have a better blend for this. But it's what I have, so that's what we're blending. Alright, so I know it looks like a mess. Again, trust me. I also realised when I was activating this that was meant to be one solid trunk, so I just added in another trunk on the side. Now we have sections where like bits jut out, where it's not quite clean. Again, we're going to work with that. So we're like, this is very much layer one. We're going to refine a lot of this. We're just chucking down things so we know where to start. So now we're going to start creating that gradient in the background. So I have two greens. They call it iron green. That's the wrong one. That's a good thing. At least I noticed it now. Right, we have Ionian green and leaf green, which are both sort of desaturated greens. And these are the greens that I've used for art. Now I may need to bring in a brighter green, so I may need to bring in that felt green as well, which I'm going to try to avoid doing, but if I have to, I have to. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start creating this gradient up. So I'm going to start with this base area, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this color down. Now as I lay this color down, there's a couple of things I'm going to do. I'm going to keep working in vertical strokes like the trees would be to grow, even though we will blend this out. If anything doesn't blend out, at least it will be the right way, which is very important if you're using something like a water soluble pencil that may not blend out entirely like Inktense does at times. I mean, you can see here I haven't blended that one, and we've still got some sideways lines, so try to avoid doing that. Try to work vertically. And we're just going to cover sort of like the bottom third in this color very, very quickly. Again, it's a base layer, it's rough, it's just about getting this color down so then we can refine later on. And the reason why I like to do this with Inktense is those trees that we've already laid down and set, they're set. Inktense does not reactivate. There may be little sections of pencil and pigment that I've missed that we will activate accidentally, but that's okay because these colors will work with what we've put in the background. So my line is not even. That's okay. I mean, again, doesn't have to be perfect. Now that bark, that shadow color I used, I'm just going to add the slightest bit across the bottom just to really darken this green at the bottom, but also to separate it from the green that's used in this moss and grass in the foreground. So that will just help with our definition. And any tree that's not quite dark enough to my liking, I can just go over at the same time too. Alright, so now we're going to start with our leaf green, and we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to start by working vertically. We're going to blend it over slightly, just so that the two colours will mix, and we might even bring our Ionian green back into this just to create like a half and half section, and then pure leaf green section. Right, so this is sort of going to be our lightest section. So I probably will need to bring in just a little bit of a lighter green, and I'm thinking I'll bring in the felt green because that's going to probably tie in the best with the leaf green. It's still a bit bright for what I want, but again, I am working with a limited palette, so we have to make do with what we've got. So I'm only going to bring in just a small amount of this, and then we're going to, let me restart that. So I'm only going to bring in a small amount of the felt green. But then after the felt green, we're going to shade back into our leaf green and even start to bring in some darks at the top, because if you think about trees, they grow up and then the branches branch out, and you've got sort of like a canopy on top. So there would actually be some darkness where all those leaves and branches are just creating more cluster, and it's actually darker. So we're also going to bring some of our darkest back up. So I'm going to start with my leaf green and just leaving the slightest little gap. I'm actually going to just quickly colour in the rest of this. And the gap is just so I know where my light section is. Again, still working in those vertical strokes. I know, it looks so messy. You gotta trust the process sometimes. And so what I'll be doing with the felt green is just a little bit of felt green in here. Just a little bit of brightness. And then we have our felt green, our pure leaf green, and then we'll start bringing in some of our Ionian green at the top. And we may even bring in some of our bark as well, but we'll assess that after we activate. So yeah, I'll just carry on through doing the rest of this, and then we'll talk about the next step. Okay, so we've got one final step before we activate and smush this all together. So I talked about how we're working in layers, and we've got the foreground, we've got the midground, and now we're creating that foggy, misty background that you can barely see the detail of. And we need to create the illusion that we're in more of a forest. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our tree pencils, so a combination of the willow and the bark, because some of these trees would be lighter and some of these trees would be darker. And all we're going to do is literally create some lines. No definition, no shape. Well, it's a shape, it's a line, but you know, not anything more than a skinny line. And what will happen is when we activate all this, is these lines, like, they'll still be there, but they're going to be bled out. So it'll be trees in the distance without being defined too clearly as a tree. You'll see what I mean when we activate it. So and then I'm going to do the same with our lighter tone. And what it'll be is, like, because of the blur of the forest, because there are different sized trees in here, the lighter ones are sort of like our skinnier trees, the ones that are even further away, the ones that are getting more of those lights. So we're just seeing very little of them. versus the darker ones are sort of like the bigger trees where there would be a little bit more showing of them. So try to keep your lines, lined up. But if it just so happens that maybe you've got some extra lines, that's actually okay, because maybe it just gets skinnier and certain bits are hidden and certain bits are revealed. Like, your mind will make sense of this mess. Our minds are quite cool in that sense, where they do sort of trick us and we can do things that don't seem too logical, but our brains will try to make sense of it, because our brains do like order and patterns. And I forgot to put my phone on silent. I always do that. It's always when you start recording you get a billion messages as well. But yeah, basically, like, our brains are really cool. They make sense of mess. So again, looks like a mess, but I hope you're starting to see that forest sense coming into it, because as I look at this, my brain is looking at this and going, oh, it's a forest, even though it's also a mess, because I'm starting to see those shapes come forward. And that's my brain. Even though logically I know this is a pile of lines and not anything defined, my brain is immediately reading this as a forest. So now comes the fun part. Now we start to blend. And you do want to keep this soft. So those lines that we've created, we're starting to blend them together. So this tree that's in the middle of this, we are activating this with the background. If it bleeds and, smushes and isn't a clear line, that's what we want. We want to create the illusion of a tree in the forest, but we want it blurry. We don't want the crisp edge. The crisp edge is the foreground. So, and if you do this and you sort of go over those pre-activated areas and maybe there's a little bit of crossover, totally fine. Again, this is why I like the ink tints, because with the ink tints, the areas that I've already activated, they are set. So I can go back over with my brush. I am using as minimal water as possible to stop bleed through. We haven't had any bleed through yet, so that's why I do wipe my brush off on a paper towel as well. And when you are working to activate this, again, keep those strokes in mind. Work vertical, because we are trying to create the illusion of a forest. So don't smush this out this way, smush it out vertically. So now you can see we're starting to get into that really bright green area. Just keep activating, keep pushing. Now we're starting to get back into the darks. And then we're starting to get into our real darks for the canopy roof. So yeah, that's the start of our forest. Now again, this is just the first layer. We are going to go in and refine a lot of this. So I'm just going to go through and activate this, and you'll watch as our forest starts to come to life. Hey, it's Editing Amy here, and quite frankly, this tutorial is getting really long. So what I'm actually doing is I'm going to split this up into two parts. So you will see the next part of this tutorial tomorrow when I upload part 2 of the background tutorial, which will be part 3 of the series so far. Yeah, it's confusing. But thank you so much for watching. I hope this will start to inspire you, and if you have any questions, please let me know. But remember, this is just part 1. We have got a lot more work to do on this background. There is quite a few more layers to come, and you will really start to see this piece come together. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.